congruency.
Well, welcome. So this is some work done by my student Logan in her undergraduate thesis. And I think it's interesting because paper 2 we examined tension in games and music, and now we're going to look at another dimension, which is arousal. And I definitely see a lot of overlap between the different dimensions, arousal and valence and tension and everything like that. So, okay, we have music's effect on eliciting emotion behavior, right? So you got the classic elevator music, right, which is supposed to calm you down, and you hear it while you're waiting, which obviously often has the opposite effect, versus, you know, if you're at a dance club, it's supposed to be, you know, high intensity, get you moving, things like that. You know, when you go to a sports game, they play music to pump up the crowd and everything like that. So I think it's pretty clear that you can use music to elicit this kind of emotion and behavior. And also, we have this other dimension, which is analyzing decision-making in games, right? So we've seen that like the number of choices you present can influence things in games. Has anybody played any of the Telltale games, right? So the great narrative games. And the idea there, if you haven't, is it's kind of like a visual choose-your-own-adventure book from the 80s where they take popular franchises and it's like a visual choose-your-own-adventure. Anyway, a lot of the choices don't have a super big impact on the game, but some of the really important ones are emphasized by there's a little timer ticking down and the screen is flashing, and often you hear this like heartbeat. So it's telling you, the player, that this is a really important choice and, you know, your decisions are going to matter. So we're taking those two different dimensions and we want to combine them and see, you know, well, there are all these great ways to influence player choice in games, and how can we bring the music aspect into that? And they've been analyzed separately, and actually the dynamic or adaptive music, as we heard from earlier, is a way of kind of integrating gameplay and music, but we want to explicitly influence player choice using music. All right, so there's this low arousal music, and it's characterized by things like it's got a low tempo, it's calming, sedate. I had just a quick little clip here to give you an idea. So kind of slow, you can think of a, you know, piano bar music, something like that. And we have high arousal music, which is fast tempo, intense. Kind of gets the blood pumping there a little bit. And as we've seen, there are other kind of dimensions as well, but we're just looking at the arousal aspect, kind of the intensity, the tempo, things like that. Now, in a completely different dimension, we have behaviors, right? So just human behaviors, there can be characterized as social behavior, in which you do kind of exploratory actions, you want to engage with others. The idea with the cruise last night, if anybody went to that, was to have people engage in this social behavior, right? You create this welcoming atmosphere, you want to go mingle, you want to interact with others. And as opposed to that, we have an avoidance behavior. So I think like my first time in England here, I think like the tube is, you know, people exhibit this avoidance behavior, right? You know, you kind of keep to yourself, you zoom off as soon as your stop comes, and you don't really interact with others. So what we propose is this mapping of low arousal music causes social behavior, and high arousal music causes avoidance behavior. And you know, why have we chosen this mapping? Well, you may be understimulated if you have low arousal music. You know, it's calming, you have extra emotional processing power to go engage with others. It may also be make you feel more safe, more at ease, so you can go ahead and interact with others. And high arousal music is, you know, basically overloading you with emotional baggage, and you know, you're going to want to just avoid others, and you're going to want to focus on yourself. So what we did was we made a choose-your-own-adventure game built in Twine, which is a really nice prototyping system for text-based choose-your-own-adventure games. And the scenario is participants are playing a tourist in this mysterious city which they've never been in. We had 8 scenarios, basically decision points in the game, and we had 2 choices at each point, 2 social and 2 avoidance ones. What we would do is randomly play a song for them, first 15 seconds of a song, as they're kind of reading the scenario and making their choice. Well, as you can anticipate, if we randomize the music and keep everything else neutral, then the idea is if we have social music, they'll choose social choices, and if it's random, they'll be selecting kind of random behavior. We can see here kind of an example of it. So, you're collecting your suitcase from the baggage, you make your way to a taxi, driver greets you. So now one of 2 kinds of music plays, right? Either that calming piano bar music, in which case you might want to take a social action, right? Chat with the driver or something like that. But if you have this really intense music, then you're going to maybe choose an action that has you avoid that social behavior. Okay, so basically we said high arousal music maps to avoidance behavior, low arousal music maps to social behavior. I think this is also interesting in experimental design because it's so hard to keep that neutral scenario, right? We had 2 pilot studies where it turned out that the kinds of wording of the scenarios, or maybe even the scenarios themselves, kind of lended itself to the behavior. So we really did a lot of emphasis on trying to create this as neutral as possible, so arousal was the main thing we're taking a look at. So we took some computer science students, right? They're free test subjects, got them from computer science classes, ran some statistical testing on it, and we looked at the difference in behavior of the 2 populations. Basically, was there a difference in the choice making, right? So did music influence things, everything else being equal? Well, we found out that high arousal music did map to avoidance behavior statistically significantly. So kind of the takeaway from that is you have this high intensity music, you're more likely to take avoidance actions, right? So you're more likely to avoid people, you're more likely to keep to yourself, you're more likely to feel less safe and want to explore. However, low arousal music did not map to social behavior, so we didn't really see a statistical correlation there. So, first talking about the high arousal music, if we played high arousal music, we could influence player choices, right? And that can be a very important thing for a game designer. Maybe you want to have the person feel like they have a sense of control over their action, but you want to subtly influence them in a particular direction. You could think of narrative games where you don't want to break immersion by limiting player choice, but you want to gently nudge them to a decision that you have pre-computed. Now, why was this social behavior not mapping to the low avoidance or low arousal? We're not really sure yet. That's another thing for us to explore. And it seems like low arousal music, not the way to go, right? But there's lots of other ways that you could perhaps influence players. Can social behavior be created using music in a different dimension, right? So maybe we want to explore the tension that we talked about in Talk 2. Or maybe there's a factor other than music, right? So what we could do is explore something like a narrative role, where previous work says that, music aside, players are more likely to take actions mapping to a role that they either give themselves or self-assign, or maybe are given externally. So anyway, how can you generalize this? Well, if you're a game designer, you want to keep immersion and have players actually be able to make a choice on their own, but give them a nudge in the right direction. you can prompt these kind of avoidance behaviors by playing really intense music. Now, if you want them to take more social actions, low arousal music isn't the way to go, so perhaps explore a different dimension of music or something other than music entirely. So hopefully we have time for a question or two, but that is it. Yes, question in the back.
Sorry, was it 64 undergraduate computer science students?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and so how, you kind of generalized it to players. How strong do you think that generalization is?
Yeah, good question. So
out into other...
we took demographic information, so obviously we got a younger population and college students are more likely to be tech savvy. I think that that's kind of a common weakness in data collection kind of at large, but you would want to think maybe people that are less familiar with games are perhaps not captured by this population. So yeah, generalizing definitely is a concern. Yes?
So for the low arousal music, that's the piece of music that you use for the entire experiment, right?
We did both high arousal and low arousal.
But
Yep.
for low arousal, that was, I mean, for me, like the perception of the low arousal music was quite fear-based, which is a high arousal. So how did you... Like,
the
yes.
little clip I played?
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually had 4 of each music, and we played all of them in the 8 scenarios.
I mean, but did you like do an experiment where, for example, people claimed that was low arousal and...
Good question, yes. What we did was we drew from previous research where they had assigned values in different dimensions, and we chose kind of the most extremes of the arousal. So this was done by previous research assigning a low arousal. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.